Hello and welcome. My name is Carlo Rotella. I direct the Lowell Humanities Series, which is co-sponsoring this event along with the Arts Council and the Alumni Association. I see lots of alumni here. At least I'm guessing. You're not current students. And that's good. So the way this is going to work is I'll do introductions, and then we'll have a little conversation, look at a couple clips and discuss it, and then at some point we can open it up and you guys can ask questions and we can have a conversation. So basically, let's think of this as a Tuesday-Thursday class. We'll go about an hour and 15, and you'll take notes. Don't text anybody or anything like that. In fact, please do us a favor and not turn down, but turn off phones, iPads, iPods, laptops, sirens, whatever you got. Okay. So let me do introductions. I don't know how many times Chuck Hogan's been introduced in the last 48 hours here, but I'm going to do it again. Chuck Hogan, class of '89, is the New York Times best-selling author of several acclaimed novels, including Devils in Exile, The Killing Moon, and The Standoff. And his novel, Prince of Thieves, was awarded the Hammett Prize for literary excellence in the field of crime writing. And in 2010 was adapted into the film The Town. His nonfiction has appeared in the New York Times, and his short fiction has been anthologized in the Best American Mystery Stories. He's also the co-author with filmmaker Guillermo del Toro of the international bestsellers The Strain and The Fall, published worldwide in 29 languages, and there's another one on the way in the near future. He's the recipient of the 2011 Arts Council Alumni Award for Artistic Achievement. Next to him is Christopher Wilson, professor of English and American Studies at BC. He's a leading expert on American crime fiction and other representations of crime and police power, as well as a scholar of literary realism and naturalism and the history of American journalism and print culture. He's the author of the books Learning to Live with Crime, American Crime Narrative in the Neoconservative Turn, Cop Knowledge, Police Power and Cultural Narrative in 20th Century America, White Collar Fictions, Class and Social Representation in American Literature, 1885 to 1925, and The Labor of Words, Literary Professionalism in the Progressive Era. And he's written articles about the Lost Boys and Whitey Bulger and white ethnicity in the 1970s, and police interrogation techniques and crime dramas and cold cases, among many other subjects. As I said, I'm the director of the Lowell Humanities Series and the director of the American Studies program, and I am also a professor of English, specializing in the literature and culture of the city. So we're going to start this off. I think the best way to start it off is to ask just a kind of a general question to Chuck, is to ask you to talk a little bit about the relationship of the novel to the movie in your mind. And, that can take the form of what was gained and what was lost in the adaptation, but also just how you picture the relationship between the two. Why don't we start there?
Sure, thanks. Well, first of all, I really liked the movie. It was incredibly surreal when I first saw it, because I wrote the book in 2004, and then I was involved in the screenwriting of it for a while in maybe 2008, and then saw the movie again in 2010. So, it was really, it was very strange seeing it. I really thought that I'd have a lot of distance and I'd be a lot more analytical, and when in fact I was completely mesmerized and kind of drawn in, even though I kind of knew what was going to happen. That actually added to it. It really did. Because I knew what was going to happen, but I didn't know how they were going to show it, and I didn't know how it was going to be said, and I was really on the edge of my seat. So it took me a while to figure out that I really liked it, and then I was just excited for it to come out. But I don't know. I feel very fortunate and just kind of lucky that the characters really carried over pretty well from the book into the movie, and that that doesn't always happen, and it doesn't have to happen. So that really translated well, and I don't know why, but I get a lot of pleasure from that watching the movie, and I've watched the movie many times. The plot certainly changed. There are changes that are going to be made anyway for length, for budgetary reasons, etc. One thing that surprised me, that was not in the movie, that was in the book, was more of the development of there's more of a triangular relationship between the Ben Affleck character and the Jon Hamm character and the Rebecca Hall character much more in the book than in the movie. And I know exactly why they didn't do that, and that's because if you really want to get into it, it's another 15 minutes of the movie, and it's probably another $15 million of the budget, and et cetera, et cetera. But that, to me, that was really, that's the core of the book. So it was interesting to me that they were able to, hint at one side of it, but really focus on Affleck and Rebecca Hall, and still, kind of have it work. I mean, the relationship is necessarily rushed in the movie, whereas in the book, obviously, I had more time to dramatize it. So, but again, I think, given the choices that they had to make, that it came off pretty well. So that was one thing. And then the other thing, of course, is the ending, which is a little different in the movie than it is in the book. I'm not to give anything away, but I'm more of a I don't know how to put it, but the ending of the book is a lot more dramatic, let's say, and not quite as melancholy. But again, I feel like the movie really works. I mean, I really feel lucky to feel like my book is represented by a really good movie. So I've been happily coasting on that for about 6 months now.
I wanted to ask just a follow-up about the representation of Boston. There's been this, because of the film tax credit, among other things, there's been this boom in people telling stories about the neighborhoods of Boston and cities around it, and so there's suddenly all these representations of working class people in Boston, and there's also a long tradition of writing crime stories about Boston, and I'm just thinking a little bit about that. Both the novel and the movie, how do you sort of see them relating to particular precedents or influences that are in the tradition?
Well, I mean, it definitely, I can remember being here as a student, and George V. Higgins came and spoke at the Robson Theater, and listening to him speak, he lived one town over from where I lived growing up, so he was really the only author that I was aware of who I knew kind of where they lived, and it made it a little more real. So obviously The Friends of Eddie Coyle, aside from being just a favorite book, I feel like if you're ever going to work on any sort of book or movie or anything about banks, bank robbers, I mean, you have to, certainly start there. It's really, I mean, you'd be a fool not to. And so it absolutely, I mean, when I've watched that movie again recently, it really gives you a real gritty feel. There's a real street level sense of Boston, and it's not the Boston of the travel brochures or whatever. So I don't know. I was very pleased when I heard that Ben Affleck was going to make the movie, because I'd seen Gone Baby Gone, and he really got that right. I mean, he really has obviously a great feel for the texture of the town, and he's not going to give everybody the Kennedy accent, and it's going to be it's going to have that level of realism that you don't often get. So. I don't know. It felt, it feels right. The other thing for me, and this isn't really specific to Boston, but I feel like every time I watch the movie, and again, I've seen it a lot, is that it really creates a really distinct atmosphere every time I watch it. Right from the beginning, there's a real mood that it seems to slip into that I don't think is that easy to achieve. And I think part of it is, there's something very Boston-ish about it, I find.
Chris, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the differences between the book and movie, and particularly the character of the florist, who's again one of these, a kind of character who's suddenly appearing a lot in these Boston movies. Yeah. Right? So I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, as Carlo knows and mentioned, one of the things that I've done a little bit of work on is Whitey Bulger. So I connected into this film in a lot of different ways. Again, Bulger's story tends to be told in terms of the town, both as a neighborhood in the city and as the sort of the politics and culture of the city as a whole. And, the more people play the Where's Whitey, game, the larger the legend kind of gets. Absolutely. So I was interested in that dimension of the film because it seems to me like The Florist is a kind of an ingenious creation in a number of different ways. One is that again, this is I think a convention of the crime genre in a way. You know, it tends to be kind of a small shop. You know, if this were done in the key of Italian, it would be a pizza parlor. You know, that would be the. But why a florist shop? You know, I'm thinking as I'm watching this, in the novel again, he's developed, I think, more necessarily. He gets more space, just like the love story does. But his power and authority is really crucial to the story in a lot of different ways. And I'm wondering how you came to that conception, and also again how it translates into film, because here's this little guy and with one gunman out front, right, who everybody has to pay tribute to, and sort of how do you get a film to sort of see his power and authority? Because Doug in the character is always sort of saying, why do we pay tribute to this guy? Why do we honor him?
I think as I think back to how I was putting the book together, I think it became apparent to me that the story needed some sort of central figure who really represented sort of the old town and the concentration of the criminal element, and also somebody who the character of Jem would really who would give him sort of his Mount Rushmore. I want to be that guy. That's who he looks up to. But it was really important to focus that and to have something for the main character, Doug, to react to and eventually to rebel against. And I honestly didn't know the ending for The Florist is similar, pretty much the same as his ending in the book, which I did not see. That wasn't something that I had really planned, and that's really sort of came about in my thinking about Doug and where he started and where he needs to go. And by dispatching him, he's really, he sees it as a real revolutionary act, and he's sort of changing the town. Yeah. This is the one great thing that he can do for his friends, for his people, for the town, is to cut this cancer out and try to save a bunch of people.
Uh-huh. And how did you think of him as a florist?
Got it.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, I know in the book I go much more into how it's the ugliest flower shop in the world. Every flower is dead or dying.
You're gonna have to shoot me.
Well, it's funerals.
Yeah. He specializes in funerals and funeral ribbons and fake flowers too. There's a flower shop right on Main Street there that's fairly prominent in Charlestown. Someone was just talking to me about it before this. And it's a very small shop, and it just I don't know, it's one of those touch things as you're writing. It just felt right. Certainly the juxtaposition of you wouldn't think of this guy of a flower shop owner as being an angel dust dealer, but in this case,
I've got him queued up, so why don't we have a look at him? Let's see if I hit off. Theoretically, this will now work.
Don't get up. How you doing, Fergie? Listen, just wanted to stop by and tell you myself, whatever this thing is you got going on, I think my guys can handle it without me. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't hire them without you. And I wouldn't hire you without them. You're a unit.
Look, with all due respect, I didn't come here for a debate. I'm not doing it. So, work it out however you can. Calm down. Okay? Goes against my better judgment, but just out of respect, smooth things over. Let's take this part, all right?
Not gonna cut it. Do you think I'm gonna put Joe Flipperhead on this? You're gonna do what I ask.
Cut it, huh? Okay. Let me ask you something. Who the fuck do you think you are? The only guy in Charlestown with a gun? You guys run numbers and pump dope. You're an old guy with a fucked up face who don't know his glory years are behind him. I ain't fucking working for you. Got it? You got a problem with that? I live at 551 Bunker Hill Street. Stop by any time. You know where to find me.
You're gonna do this for me, or I'm gonna clip your nuts. Like I clip your daddy's.
Don't talk about my father.
Son, I knew your daddy. He worked for me for years. Years. Then he wanted his own thing. Play the horses. You know, they either geld the horse with a knife or with the chemicals. And your daddy said no to me. I did him the chemical way. Gave your mother a taste. Put the hook into her. Ah, she doped up good and proper. Hung herself with a wire on Melnair calf. And you, running around the neighborhood looking for her. Your daddy didn't have the heart to tell his son that he was looking for a suicide doper who was never coming home. If there's a heaven, son, she ain't in it. Oh. I hear you got a nice, sweet new girlfriend. Lives on the park. I don't want to send her a funeral arrangement to your house. But I will if I have to. Now I know where to find you. Claire!
So there's obviously a lot going on in that scene, and one of the things that I know Chris had wanted to talk about, and asked Chuck about too, is that Kingpin character is often connected to a kind of a generational taint in the neighborhood, so that the neighborhood has this sense of tradition that people really respond to, but there's also this sense that there's something wrong with the neighborhood, and it goes back into the generation of the fathers, and this generation is kind of diminished by whatever it is. And that's a recurring thing in Boston crime stories, and I'm just wondering, I guess both of you, in your own ways, how you, Chuck, did you have that in mind as you were writing? That it's that Whitey Bulger narrative that this used to be a better neighborhood, and then this thing happened to it, right?
I'm not really, it's so hard to kind of unravel what you've spent so much time raveling. Yeah. I don't really, I know that it was really important for me to focus, to get that. So much, Charlestown plays a huge role in the book. There's no story without it. And so to really represent it or this side of it, the criminal side of it, in a character, it just made perfect dramatic sense. So that's really the main part of it. Now, you could say that in a sense, that's the function that Whitey Bulger kind of fulfills for South Boston now, whether it's, I don't know which came first, really, in terms of the chicken and the egg there, but that's sort of the role that he has. So, I don't know, for me it was a lot more dramatically necessary than, culturally important.
Yeah,
for that.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Chris,
did you think about the generational thing? Partly, what's so powerful in that scene is the florist is just going to remake the whole story of Doug's own father right there. Right. It's just going to do it all again. Right. And the thing that I was thinking about the title, Prince of Thieves. Where again, a lot of crime narratives have this sort of dimension, and you said revolutionary. It's interesting to sort of think about, this kid is trying to sort of break out away from what happened to his father, so he's really kind of avenging that story, right? For the town, as you said.
Yeah, very much so. And his father is away in prison, so this is almost like, if you think about it in religious terms, this would be sort of, the florist is sort of the deity, he's sort of the godlike figure in the town, the ultimate sort of patriarch, who's really the dark, whatever lore. And so it is a really revolutionary act. To go against him, despite the fact that he is a guy in a small shop and he's got this one guy out there with this big tattoo, but it's the power that he wields, and it's the tradition, and it's that fear of retribution that is that's bound to come.
Yeah, Chris, you want?
Partly also, I guess what I'm asking is, if Doug is a revolutionary, is a social bandit, or these various things that people call him, where Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, that kind of thing. One of the things that people often ask about that is revolution on behalf of what? Like, what's he getting? And it was interesting what you said about the love triangle, because that's another way to look at this, of course, is that Claire is sort of in the middle between him and the florist. That right? So I tend to think about what the love interest is doing in relation to this story. One of the things I really liked about this story too is the way in which so many things about social class and about ethnicity run through the fabric of the crimes themselves. There's a great touch in when they come into the merchant's bank, and they're the first thing they do is make everybody dump their BlackBerries. I just thought that was great.
That's probably a product placement, you realize.
Yeah, it's a teacher thing. But, everybody has to kind of dump their... Claire, incidentally, went to BC. People don't know this. As did her father.
Yes.
There's a joke in the film, too, and I think it's in the book. It's about, oh, yeah, where's your father? He's in the suburbs. So... Like, I guess the thing that I'm trying to figure out is what does Claire represent against, how did you think about her in relation to this tangle that Doug is?
So her in relation to
social class, upward mobility.
Well, yeah, certainly. Doug, absolutely, that's a big part of it. She represents a lot of things too. And a lot of it is tangled up in this sort of lingering image or idea about his mother also, but definitely, he sees, the reason why I think people identify with him so much before he was played by Ben Affleck, because he is, he's a criminal, but he really, first of all, he's good at what he does. He's a planner, he's a thinker, and he's, even though the Gem thinks that he's in charge of the crew, it's really Doug who's the one pulling all the strings, and also he has these aspirations that he doesn't really know what to do with or how to get out. He knows that he needs to change or else, and doesn't know how to go about it. And so I think that's a big part of why he latches on to her. Because he starts off following her because she's the manager of the bank that he's trying to rob, and then he sees there's something about her, and that's what keeps him, looking after her when he could easily walk away. There's something there that he's going for.
It seems like gentrification is such a, a lot of Boston stories have that kind of contact between the old neighborhood people and the new people who are, overeducated and, from the suburbs or whatever. And, and I think those two things are of a piece. So there's always this, so here's a guy, as you say, he's good at what he does. He's sort of a heroic working man. He just has a very complicated and dangerous job, right? And he's trying to get something more, and he doesn't have really the resources to figure out what that thing is. And then there's this gentrification, and especially in the novel, it's figured as single women moving into the town, right? And they bring middle class possibilities, of all kinds, domestic and romantic and others, right? And the thing that I would pair that with is that other thing, which is the taint on the old neighborhood. That the old neighborhood's really attractive, it's really appealing, that these are these kind of heroic blue-collar figures. But there's also something wrong with the old neighborhood, and it goes back, the generation. Mystic River, I think, is really about that same thing. Like, the old neighborhood is really appealing, that these are these really powerful figures. But there's also something wrong with the old neighborhood. There's a taint that goes back. So I guess I wanted to ask about gentrification. I think it's such a useful figure for thinking about these little nuances of class and about possibility, for this character.
Right. Yeah, she, depending on which character, like the character of Jem, who really, he's fixated on, he wants to turn back the clock. He wants to take Charlestown back to what it was, and he's pretty convinced that he can do it, almost single-handedly. And she, to him, represents this, this incursion, and people driving up property values, so people have to move out of Charlestown, and she's definitely part of the problem. And Doug clearly doesn't see her, that way. She doesn't really. She comes not to represent anything except to be herself. So, yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic. There's that scene at the when they're eating at the pizza parlor, which is very similar in the book as it is in the movie, and that's when Jem catches up with the two of them, and that's where it really that's for me that's where the story really kicks into gear, and the movie too. Is because for me it's Doug on one side and Jem on the other, and they're very tight. They've grown up together, and Jem's really got a tight hold on Doug. And here's Claire, who, without realizing it, is pulling everything apart. And she, to Jem, represents evil. Really.
Right.
Really, she's in Jem's movie, she's the bad guy.
Right. The florist is the model, and she's
Absolutely,
the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's interesting that she gets domesticated a little at the end. She's supervising the new hockey. It's like, so she kind of gets assimilated into the town a little bit, right?
Yes.
Chris, did you?
Yeah, I mean, it's also great. I was thinking of that lunch scene too, which is, I think, just fabulous. But because Jem comes in and says, Dougie's a great worker, and it's amazing because I think that juncture point is really fun because it's, for a while, I think longer in the novel than in the film, you wonder whether he's working, on casing her out and making sure she's not going to, or he's playing, he's following his own, and so, Jem shows up right at the right moment to kind of test that out, and it's great.
I wanted to do another clip and just think about Doug and Jem. This is the scene in which they air their differences in the traditional fashion, which is very different in the novel than in the movie, by the way. Let's see, so if I unmute that.
Something wrong with the apartment?
No. Florist.
Florist what?
Came through.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
It's large, Dougie. It's
We're
large.
smoked. Hunt it. Look, pick up an extra guy, all right? Or go with 3 guys. Or fucking be smart and boot it.
So you're not going?
No.
Why is that?
Because we got a ton of fucking heat on us, for one thing.
We'll put a move on him, right? We've done it 100 times before.
You know what? Forget it. Do what you want to do. I'm done.
What?
I'm
What?
done.
You're done?
What does it sound like?
I don't know. What's that mean?
What the fuck you think of me?
What does that mean you're done? It sounds like a bunch of fucking bullshit.
Let me put it to you this way. I'm putting this whole fucking town in my rear view.
There's people I can't let you walk away from.
What? Who?
Come on.
Are you serious, Jimmy? She's not my kid. Did she tell you it was? Like, look, cut it out. All you give a fuck about is Coke and Xbox. Now you're trying to play it off like you care about Shine? Come on now.
You know what your fucking problem is?
What?
You think you're better than people.
Uh-huh.
Mr. fucking Clean and Mr. fucking goddamn Hide and Mighty, right?
Yeah, I'm better than all these people.
Yeah,
You're right.
that's
I'm
what you
better than
think.
anybody in this fucking
You grew
project.
up right here. Same rules that I did.
Who the fuck you think you are? You aren't letting me or not letting me do shit. All right? Here's a little fucking cheat sheet for you. It's never gonna be me and you and your sister and Shine fucking playing house up there. All right? You got it? Get that in your fucking head. I'm tired of your one-way fucking bullshit. If you want to see me again, come down and visit me in Florida. Go.
In the 302, feds had me dropping Brennan right here. I got him back on Tibbetts. Fucking guy ran 100 yards with a ball in his heart. I mean, the fucking guy shouldn't run track. You know what I'm saying?
They asked you to do that.
Yeah, well, you didn't have to, Dougie. Come on. They told me Brendan Leahy was coming down here to roll up on you with a Glock 21, so I came over here, and I put him in the fucking ground. They're 9 years for it. Now, you don't gotta thank me, but you're not walking away.
I'm grateful for everything you've done for me. Your family took me in when my father went away. You're like a brother to me. But I'm leaving. You shoot me? Go ahead. But you're gonna have to shoot me in the back.
Couple things about that strike. One is that how much these actors enjoy doing that accent. You know, that they really, really like doing that accent. And the other one is that Ben Affleck's been trying to leave since Good Will Hunting. You know, but that sense that, you know, that as you said, the representative, the guy who wants to grow up to be the florist, wants him to stay and wants nothing to change. And there are these really powerful forces, these big flows of, you know, money and people and culture just changing the neighborhood. It can't stay the same. And I think that's what they're fighting about. I like the fact that it's kind of a hockey fight, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, sure, pulled up. Yeah, I mean, when he says you grew up right here, same rules as I did. I mean, there are rules, and Jem has a very clear idea of what those rules are. I can remember when I was, you know, in part of the research and talking to people. I mean, there were people who lived in Charlestown who really hadn't been to Boston. You know, they hadn't crossed over. I mean, they would drive, if they had to drive through, they'd go. But they were very much in their own little island there, and there are rules for living and for doing and for what you do and what you don't do. And I think those rules. I think that gets to what you were talking about a little earlier in terms of this sort of it's almost like a cultural pollution that sets in where things have to be a certain way, and if you start to try to deviate, that's when other people feel threatened and try to hold on to you.
Essentially police you, right? Exactly.
Yeah,
keep you in line. Yeah. Chris, did you have?
Yeah, I mean.
Good night, Claire.
Why the graveyard? I think that's interesting too.
Right.
In that, partly because, again, I was trying to think about what is the florist, doing most of the time. Is going to funerals, and one of the things that I think a pivot that's interesting in that sequence, which is in both things too, is that Jem is also making a decision in the same way that Doug is. That is that Jem has said he's not going back to prison, that he's going to die out there.
Right.
That's what he's going to do.
Right.
And I mean, I think that's a very important thing to be thinking about, is that kids deciding to die. By doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a real sense of turf, and it seems old-fashioned and kind of I don't know, like West Side Story-ish, but there really is, and again, it's really, I mean, Jem is really kind of wild, and he's such a tough guy, but I do think he's motivated by fear, and it is this fear of change and of being classed out and of being supplanted and uprooted and having to go somewhere new and not having these rules that give him this, this really clear structure, for a living. And if he had to rethink that, then he has to rethink everything. So he hangs on that much more tightly to the status quo.
Chuck, would you tell us a little more about the research that went into the?
Sure. I first had the idea for writing the story. It was this article in the Globe that I quote at the beginning of the book. And it was like the 13th paragraph of this longer article that said more bank and armored car robberies come from Charlestown than any other place in the country. And I was like, wow, first of all, why Charlestown and why armored cars? And that really got me. I mean, growing up here, I kind of knew, that it was this locus for that. But to see it in print really sort of, maybe pay attention. And that's when I started thinking about it. And I kind of had this idea about a bank teller or a bank manager and basically the Doug and Claire relationship. But I didn't feel like I was really, like I was quite ready to do it. It felt like I had a really good idea, and I didn't want to screw it up, so I would work on something else and kind of research it. So it was a long time. It was from there, I didn't actually start writing it until 8 years later, so a lot of collecting information about banks and bank security, and certainly a lot of hanging out in Charlestown. And the toughest part was finding out about armored cars and how they do what they do, because they don't really want to, help you. And when you go to them asking about it, they get a little suspicious, it turns out. So, but it's also cool. It's one of those things, when you get, I find, doing a book or researching anything, when you get into it, things start to happen. And I can remember I was seeing armored cars everywhere. I mean, I'd be at, I remember I was at Kohl's, we were shopping, and I had my then young daughter with me, and we saw this guy in a uniform come by with a little change truck. I was like, oh, great. So we go outside. And she's playing out in front, and I'm scoping out the armored car. The kid's a great cover for that. And then my mother was ill. She was in the hospital here in Boston, and she's a smoker. So she's sitting outside in the wheelchair smoking, and I'm standing there next to her, and we're talking. And an armored car pulls up right in front of us, and it was just great. Just talking to her and watching. The guy had the earphone, which I thought was interesting, and he opens up the door, and I could see the parabolic mirror and all this stuff. So, some of the stuff really sort of came to me in that way, but it was, it's fun. The most fun part of writing is research, because it's not writing, and you get to follow your interests, and you get to hang out in Charlestown, and I find it's better if I don't really, interview people or ask questions. People just like to talk, and you listen, and I find that if people know that I'm doing research, then they tend to tell me what they think I want to know, which is rarely what I want to know. I really want to know the little details, the small, sort of telling things, and it was really. I had never lived there. I'd never spent a lot of time in Charlestown. So getting to know it was really fascinating. I mean, it's really, the great thing about writing is, as I say, following your interests and trying to find a way to make them interesting to the reader. And that's and it really informed the story and really made the story pop that much more.
So do people have people from Charlestown? Boston is a city of professional Bostonians, and it's like their job is to police the accents and make sure you get stuff right, and like there's certain people like Kevin Costner who cannot show their face in this town because their accent's so bad. And I'm just wondering, so specifically when you're really, so much is about this intensely sort of inner experience of being from this place that you're not from. Do people from there sort of feel free to pronounce on whether you got it right or not, or what?
They do, but it's been overwhelmingly positive. But that's because, having grown up here, I knew that if I screwed it up, I'd be hearing about it forever, forever and ever and ever, and not just hearing about it, like, oh, hey, you got this wrong. It would be like, your book sucks.
Or your book was great until page 226, and then you got something wrong.
Exactly. There's no Dunkin' Donuts on that block, and I was like, sorry. But again, that was fun. It was fun trying to really. I knew that I had to make the place a character in the book anyway, and to really try to get it right. It was a real challenge, and it really sharpened my skills. But no, I remember doing a reading at the Charlestown Public Library right after the book came out. They invited me to come, and then a day or two before I was scheduled to go there, I got a call from the librarian saying, we just want to let you know, we've had a few phone calls. Some people aren't. They're not so happy with Charlestown being presented in a negative light. So I'm like, all right, great. See you on Wednesday. And so I showed up, and there's a long toast at the beginning of the book, and I read that first thing, and they just really, it's my first and only standing ovation. They just, they really liked it, and my car windows didn't get broken, and I made it home okay. No, they, I think it's more important to get a sense of a place right. And once you get that, people, will kind of go with it. And plus, I was really careful. There's a kind of a disclaimer at the beginning, because my family, we're all from South Boston. All four of my grandparents are from there. And as I travel around, and when you mention South Boston to people outside Massachusetts or in, people have a fairly negative reaction, which is too bad because it's a certain element, but there's a lot of great people there, and I know it's the same in Charlestown. So I try to stress that also,
Right.
and it's worked so far.
Well, we should open it up to if people have things they want to ask or tell you. For instance, that gentleman there has been waiting.
So one character I really liked in the book, and wasn't really developed in the movie, for obvious reasons, but is Des Elman.
Yep.
That was an interesting character. Again, you're working class family, but he has a very strong morals and developed talent.
Right.
Ironically, he's paired us with these gangsters that putting some of the money still back in the church.
Right.
But that's an interesting character, because they do exist in places like
Absolutely, they do. Yeah. Yeah.
It's something that the old Jimmy King did great.
Yeah. Yeah, he was really, I mean, he was sort of the, I kind of thought of him as kind of the writer of the crew, because he's the guy who's always trying to figure out where he stands, in terms of his friends. Whereas, Doug is just sort of this natural, leader, and Jem doesn't care, and Glonsley, the other guy, couldn't care less. But Des is really, he's always trying to figure out where he stands, and he's really, he really values his friendship with Doug, and Doug kind of, sees that in him too. And he's definitely the, he's the only guy who has a real job at the phone company, and that, comes in handy. And he's, you feel like he's there more because he just really is, just really likes Doug and kind of wants to be him,
Very clear.
Completely, yeah. Right.
All right, I'd say we've done our part here, huh?
You know what? Not now.
Right. Yeah, he lives in they call it the Neck, which is just, it's part of Charlestown, but it's not part of what they consider the island, so it's under the overpass. And yeah, thanks. I appreciate you bringing that up.
I just wanted to say I love the audacious heist of Fenway Park.
Thanks. Cool, thanks.
And was that part of your original plan for the book, or did it come to you as you were writing the book?
I remember I didn't really know at the beginning. I knew that that I wanted to build to something, and it really came out of my thinking through the characters. There's something early on where Doug is trying to figure out the next job, and he's trying to figure out. The book takes place in the late '90s, but even then, credit cards are being used a lot. There's not a lot of free cash around, and he's thinking about possibilities. And that's when it sort of occurred to me that, especially back in the 90s, I mean, it was still very much a cash business, and yeah, a good, weekend series with the Yankees, we could probably do pretty well. And it's funny because now, since the movies come out, my circle of acquaintances has broadened in terms of, people, bank robbers and such want to they're interested and they like it and they want to meet me and I've talked to a fellow who said, and very, very straightforward, he's like, I thought about Fenway. He's like, I had an idea about how to do it. I had an idea and I couldn't get anybody to do it with me. They thought, what? He said, if we ever pulled it off, they would never let us sleep. We'd always be hunted. So.
Did you ever come up with a theory about why there are more bank robbers?
Well, no, somewhat. I mean, I don't really know the reason why, but I think. Do I know? No, but in the book, the reasoning is part of it is that the main prison in Boston was in Charlestown, and so people, if they wanted to visit, they would move closer and plus armored cars. As I said, it was the most difficult thing to research, and that's the sort of information that really has to be passed down person to person. So I think it makes sense that that information is going to stay close. And I think a little bit too, it reflects something of the character of the place. It was Bunker Hill. That's where the Battle of Bunker Hill was fought. And there's this. I think there's. I could be reading this into it, but to me, it felt interesting if there was this, still this anti-federal, anti-government sort of, bias. And if you can rip off money that's insured by the government, you're not only are you kind of winning the lottery, but you're kind of sticking it to the man at the same time.
And there's a certain number of audacious heists in the Boston literature. I mean, Friends of Eddie Coyle it's a low-grade heist, but it's really interesting. And then Brink's Job, right, is the sort of, that's the pre-Fenway. Fenway's thinking even bigger than the Brink's Job, right? Tim, go ahead.
You said that the idea for the story was sort of percolating for a while, so this might be the answer to the question, but the book came out in 2004, but it's set in the mid-90s. What was the consideration sort of not setting it in sort of contemporary time? I asked this because I read this from my book club, and the first question I asked people was, let's talk about all the different scenes that would be different if you could have just bulked it up on the phone.
Right. Right.
And then I guess Professor Wilson, if you wanted to talk about like how technology is sort of changing the way crime stories are written.
Yeah, the main reason why I set it back a bit was because Charlestown seemed like it was already changing so much, and the gentrification was really happening. And I wanted to go back a little more so that there was still that real conflict. I mean, the conflict's still there, but I really wanted to get at what it would be like to be a single woman moving to this old neighborhood. And again, yeah, there was more cash around. I mean, nowadays, I'm not sure we'll see another contemporary real heist movie. I mean, you can still rob banks, that's where the cash is, but everything is going electronic. So it was good to go back even just 6 years at the time to a time when you could pull off those things.
Two things. One is the ATM. You talk a lot about it in the novel.
Right.
It's kind of its fresh moment. The ATM with all its cash around. I think that's part of the fun of it. The other thing is the interesting transformation of the relationship between federal and local authority. Again, it's a standard thing in crime novels. The sort of we're a national organization. That's one of the closing lines of this thing. And the byplay between the federal and the local. I think now I actually find a lot more integration between the federal and the local, and that has something to do with something that gets mentioned kind of in passing, but is terrorism and identity theft. A lot of identity theft legislation is connected to terrorism, anti-terrorism policing. So there's much more integration than there, even in Boston, than there would have been before.
But on a storytelling level, I mean, I think it's totally, I mean, if you watch crime stories on TV, you are watching people talking on their cell phones and looking at computer screens. I mean, it's mind-numbingly dull, But it's a way to just move, Law and Order, it's just like, well, we need to move this narrative along. Oh, they get a phone call, it's the lab, they said, and then you just go right. And
The Wire takes care of this by, in that first season, it's like, beepers only, no cell phones.
Yeah. Cell phone's tough on novels, I think. It takes away a lot of... Did I miss anything? Yeah, go ahead.
You just talked a moment ago how you made a lot of new friends. They gave you some more storylines you didn't have before. Could you talk about how you developed your career, your craft, being a crime writing novelist? How did you get there?
I'm completely unqualified for the job, if that's what you're asking. It's true. I really started out. I loved. This is the kind of book that I love to read, and I was having trouble finding books, crime books that really, that left a real impression on me. So I thought, this is something maybe I could do. Maybe I could write a book that somebody would read and not leave on the seat of the airplane, but might want to hang on to. So that's really that was it was really just wanted to write the kind of book that I wanted to read. Why I'm interested in it, I'm not really sure. I mean, it's not like I'm the victim of a crime or I suppose I am a criminal at heart. But I really don't I don't have there's no straight line answer. It's constantly fascinating. I mean, I feel like pretty much every book centers around a crime. Either it's an emotional crime or a real crime. And crime novels just sort of bring that out. They bring it right to the front and right to the forefront. And I don't know. It's just I'm fascinated by people push it to their extremes and also subcultures. The way showing a part of the world that most of us don't get to see. That's just interesting to me. Thanks.
Yes, sir, right in the front row.
I just want to make a question and an observation. In the film, in the time when they had all the cash, that to me is a great thing in movies. You have stories about criminals, crime, and Hollywood does that. It's almost like a reflection. We'll be creative, we'll make a story, we'll make all this money. You know, and I think that whether it's about subtext or not, I think that kind of reinforces the storyline and also what they're actually doing with families, friends, you know, get together. That's what the crew
Right.
They make a lot of cash out of it. The other thing was in the Desmond character, you referred to him as the Monsignor. In the movie True Confessions, Robert De Niro,
Right.
is Monsignor.
Oh, really?
Pick that up. It's just as a sort of insight.
I did. No, I'm aware of that movie, but I think it came out in '81. I think I was too young to see it at the time. It was rated R. But no, I wasn't. I sort of came at it. I mean, I had an uncle, a great uncle, who actually graduated from Boston College in I think it was the first class here in 1925, who was a Monsignor in Somerville. So, and as I said, as is sort of on the outskirts of Charlestown, almost in Somerville. So it just, it sort of matched up for me. But thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'd like to ask about casting. There's some incredible individual performances in the movie.
Yeah.
One that really stands out, I think, is Pete Postlethwaite as florist, an amazing character actor. I think it was actually his last performance, or pretty close to it.
I think so.
Was he what you visualized when you wrote that character? And were there other characters in the movie played by these actors who were different from the characters you wrote?
Well, first of all, I mean, I had no say in the casting, but I agree with you. I mean, I thought it was great. He's very, very similar to how I pictured him. I pictured him as, I'm a big Mickey Rourke fan, and I actually saw him as Mickey Rourke. In fact, in the book, he's described, he wears sweatshirts that are like cut for like a woman's cut, so they're like shorter and bulked up. And I remember reading that Mickey Rourke used to do the same thing and wear that. And Mickey Rourke had that boxing career, and he kind of got his face messed up. And I really saw him in that sense. And then when I was working on the movie with the previous director, it was Adrian Lyne who had directed Mickey in 9.5 Weeks and other things. And so we would talk about it, and he was like, "Yeah, that would be great." And I was like, "This is the ultimate writer's dream, where I've written something." I've dreamed it, and it's going to happen. I'm going to meet Mickey Rourke, and he's going to play this guy, and it didn't happen at all. But I was close. But yeah, I mean, Pete Postlethwaite is tremendous in this. I think it was his second to last role, but I'm not sure the other movies come out. Yeah, he's great. I mean, just the way he cuts up those the thorns off the rose, and it's fantastic. So I was really pleased. Part of the fun for me. I was involved in the screenwriting, and then I was completely uninvolved. So I would hear things literally through the news or through meeting someone. I met someone who was going to work on the movie, and they said, "Oh, we cast Jon Hamm." I'm like, "Wow, that's great." And then I remember my agent called me one morning, and he said he's in New York. And he said on page 6 of the New York Post there's a picture of Blake Lively reading Prince of Thieves. And I was like, "Wow, that's great, thanks." And I hung up, and I Googled Blake Lively because I'm not I'm not in the Gossip Girl demographic. And there she was holding the book, and I'm like, "Wow," and she's absolutely not how I pictured Krista at all. In the book, she's much more, she's much harder edge and much rougher. But I thought she's amazing. I mean, I really think she's amazing. In the movie, she was fantastic. So. And then I think the hardest role of all, the most difficult one, was the Rebecca Hall role, because she doesn't get to grab a gun or go running down the street, or she doesn't get any sort of action scene. She's got to really center it, and to know that she's actually British, and I just feel like she was phenomenal in it, and so yeah, I'm very happy with it.
Yes, sir.
Well, we talked about George V. Higgins earlier. Definitely. As I say, not only his books, but he was sort of this semi-mythical figure. And for me, living one town over, I was trying to figure out how someone became an author and how they, wrote a book. I think Richard Price he's, as far as I'm concerned, he's the top guy in crime, because he takes the crime and works into all these other social issues. I think he's fantastic. Influences, I read a lot of older crime, novels. I mean, certainly, Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler, even though I could never see me writing a private eye novel, but those guys really, I mean, I find it, phenomenally inspirational. I don't know why, but it really, the older stuff really speaks to me. And, for fiction, I wish I could read more. Nowadays, I do so much research. It's a lot of nonfiction, but also I read a lot of psychology. That really took me between, say, my first book and my third book, and Prince of Thieves was my third. I think that really made the big difference. So I really started to look at the characters in a psychological manner, as opposed to just trying to create these characters and to give them these realistic motivations, and it really made things click for me. Thanks.
Way back there.
Do you see yourself ever wanting to be more involved in either the movie that comes from your book, or maybe just a movie that is from another book that you read that you thought was a great book, and why or why not? So if you think maybe one day you would want to be more involved, why, if not?
Yeah, no, I definitely would, and now I kind of am. The producers of The Town, who are also the producers of The Departed, we're working on something now that's a Boston-based crime story. Can you believe it? But it's based on a real person, but through this person, we hope to really tell really take Boston crime from the early '60s, from the sort of the formation of the Winter Hill Gang was formed in the early '70s, but pre that, through Winter Hill into the '80s, which I think could be phenomenal. Sort of, if you think about starting at sort of like the Mad Men time, but instead of Madison Avenue, it's more gritty Boston, and then following it through. I'm very excited about that. So there's that, and my most recent novel, I've done the screenplay, and it's out to different directors and things. So I've always been interested in it. I actually did the screenplay for my first novel, which was it never became a movie, as most don't. And it's great to be able to go back and forth, to have it completely my own way, writing a book where every decision is mine, to collaborating with other people, sometimes a bunch of other people. It's great to go back and forth, it really is. So I hope to do more of it.
Right there, go ahead. Yes, you. Yes, you.
Why do you think that Boston is such a good crime city? I'm from Staten Island. Don't hate, I'm not a Yankees fan. And I come from a long line of Staten Islanders, and one of the things that I really liked about the town was that it's this place that's in the cities, but it's other. I mean, Staten Island is often compared to, or often said to be the forgotten borough.
Right.
And I think it's a great crime setting place, maybe because I know a lot of criminals, but, and grew up with many, but I am not a criminal. That being said, I'm just curious as to why I'm married to a Bostonian, I'm sister-in-law to a Bostonian, and they love Boston crime stories. I'm just curious as to why it's like such a rockin' crime.
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm sort of waiting for the backlash to begin, and I'll be, out of a job completely because it's bound to crest at some point. I think a lot of it has to do, maybe surprisingly, I think with history. I think there's a real historical component, and maybe not surprising because we were talking about generations. I think that's a big part of it, and because Boston, has been around for so long, there are rules, to be broken, and I think that leads to the different neighborhoods and turf battles and just different people coming into contact.
Chris,
I'm betting you have something.
Yeah, no, I don't have any sense of the special claim, but I think as we're hearing it, I mean, I imagine you could imagine a crime story about Staten Island that you'd want to tell, and it would have to do. It would have to do with geography, in part like the use of the bridge, and this and the island and that kind of stuff. And I think it has a lot to do with, traditionally with crime stories, have a lot to do with white ethnicity and the relationship of white ethnicity to politics, and so neighborhoods and who rules neighborhoods and it tends to be quite a potent story when we get out to Los Angeles and we have a more horizontal city. I mean, there are different kinds of stories that get told. So I don't know about a special claim, but it's a combination of those things. And I think probably we ought to at some point say something about the political dimension of it in the sense that this is something that was interesting about Bulger and the Bulger boys. Was sort of the interesting is the kind of power that gets represented by the florist. Is he an alderman, or is he, what exactly is he? And so I think that a lot of urban stories are trying to work that out. What's the relationship of the neighborhood to the city?
Right. Also, I think that to put those two things together, the history and the layering with these other dynamics going on. I mean, it's also, we prefer not to tell stories about class, but you can actually tell stories about class by telling Boston crime stories, and you can do actually pretty nuanced class stuff. I mean, think about the end of the movie, which is very different from the novel. It's this fantasy of a regular guy, a super potent regular guy. He puts on a tea driver suit, and he leaps over the rooftops of Charlestown, and he knows how to drive a bus, And when the cops say clear the street, he says, "I'm just going to work," right? And it's a fantasy of how a regular guy passes like mist through the federal dragnet, right? And I think the Boston stories are often really about that, about this. As I said, these guys really enjoy speaking with these accents. I mean, they very clearly get a lot of pleasure out of it, right? And I think people get a lot of pleasure out of watching those kind of stories. We have time for a couple more, and then class is going to be over. Yeah, yes, ma'am, go ahead.
The town was my original title, actually, for the manuscript, and that's what went to the publishers. And my editors, rightly so, said, the title doesn't really give you any sort of sense of what sort of story you're getting. So, unfortunately, they came to me with this late in the process, so we were going back and forth on other titles, and I remember last minute the publisher was really pushing for Thick as Thieves. And, yeah, I saw, Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, Spies Like Us. So it was actually I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was my agent sort of putting some titles through Amazon, putting them together. And he put through Prince of the City and Thick as Thieves. And he's like, what about Prince of Thieves? And that's how that happened. So for me, but my title stayed on the manuscript as it went out to Hollywood and went through numerous producers and a couple of screenwriters, including myself, and came out with that title. So then they reissued the book with my original titles. So I don't know how I feel about Prince of Thieves. It's only because it really wasn't my title, It's good, but the town is good too. But it's just a big difference between movies and books. I think with movies, the title generally comes with a poster or an image in mind, so the title isn't, you don't have to, you can be a little more evocative, whereas with a book, or at least a genre book, you don't always get the book cover with the title description, or if there's a list, or unless you're in a bookstore, and nowadays fewer people are. If you're going to be, looking it up, you want to have some sort of sense of it. So that's how it happened.
We have time for a couple more, and then we'll do some signing out there, right? So let's do a couple more. Yes, sir, go ahead.
After I read Prince of Thieves, I read The Standoff, and I really liked it. And I was wondering, were there plans to make that into a movie, or is it sort of
There were, yeah. That was the movie. That was it was like a week after the book sold. and I was meeting with my agent, and she was like, well, there's been some film interest, and I said, I would love to write the screenplay. She's like, why didn't you say so, earlier? And I'm like, well, because that's not really, it's a little too magical, and that became part of it. And so I was actually, just a few months later, I was out working on the screenplay, and it was really interesting, but it was also really weird. It was right after I had finished the book, so I'd spent all this time sort of, building a small idea into this giant book, and then trying to boil it down into a script. But I just did the first draft, and they wanted me to do more. But I really felt, like I owed my agent my next book, and then I needed to get started on it. So someone else came onto it, and then someone else, and it just petered away. So no, unfortunately, unless they can find a way to update it, that probably is. I assume it's gone forever.
All right, one more. Yes.
How did you get involved and work with doing this with Toro, and how did you collaborate?
He had this idea for the story. He originally saw it as a television series and couldn't really get people to see his vision, and thought, well, maybe if I can do it in another form, and he thought maybe do a novel. But his idea was to take this sort of supernatural story and tell it in a procedural, almost like a police procedural crime sort of way. And so somehow my agent got wind of that and suggested me, and I don't know. I'm glad that I don't really know the process, but somehow he read it, and we met. I don't know how many years ago now, maybe 4 years ago. This was actually, my agent called me, and he said, do you know who Guillermo del Toro is? And this was right after Hellboy, the first one, had come out. So I said, yeah, the director of Hellboy. He's like, yeah, he has this movie coming out, Pan's Labyrinth. But he said it quickly, and I had no idea what he was talking about. And I'm like, great, yeah. So we met at the New York Film Festival like on a Sunday morning, and we had this long breakfast, which has become our tradition about how we work. Long breakfast, and he told me more about the story, and I was really fascinated, and I knew that I wanted to work on it. And then so I started working on that with him, just sort of informally, just on a handshake, just to see if it was going to work. And then like 6 months in, Pan's Labyrinth came out, and it was this incredible movie. And I thought, wow, I really have to step up my game. This isn't just a comic book, And we spent a year literally working on it without any sort of contract between us, which is kind of crazy. And after that, he liked it, and I liked it, and then and that's how that happened. So what we do is at the beginning of every book, we get together, and we have like 3 or 4 days of marathon breakfasts, and we talk about it. And he tells me, he has very specific ideas about the biological aspect of the characters of the monsters, and he's this creative fountain. And then I'll try to bat back a couple of tennis balls, and we'll go like that. And then we'll separate. We'll work on a treatment together, email it back and forth, and then it's just sort of, it's not chapter by chapter, but it's chunk by chunk, sending it back and forth, depending on what he's doing, depending on where he is, and depending on where I am. And I don't know. It's worked great. I mean, it's just, for me personally, it's a phenomenal opportunity to be able to do something outside of my profile, which is crime writing, and to do it in kind of a safe way in terms of my career, so that people don't think all of a sudden I've become a horror writer or something like that. And it's just great to work with someone like him. I mean, he's one of a kind. So I'm getting a lot more out of it than I'm putting into it, it seems. But that's just good for me.
Does either of you have a final word before we wrap things up? Chris, do you have one last?
Yeah, I have a theory about why there are more bank robbers. There are more banks. Part of the sort of the structure of the city sometimes gets reflected in the crime, in that way too. Mm-hmm. Finance and capital. That's one of the things that goes on here.
Right. That's where the money is, as they say.
You got to think like a criminal.
Yes, I know.
No. So many thanks to our guests, Chris Wilson, Chuck Hogan, and Chuck will be signing outside.